Hi design thinkers, this is part 2 of a 2-part series building an advanced table inside of Figma. If you haven't seen part 1, I've provided a link in the description box below. But if you're ready to go, then let's jump into the video. Alright, here we are building out our advanced table inside of Figma, part 2. If you haven't done part 1, I'd recommend checking that out in the link below. Where we left off was we built out our responsive table. We learned how to switch out our elements, how to stack them, and then how to use our components to quickly build out the actual columns in a row and also fill in our table with rows. So we should have done something similar to this. What we're doing in this one is we're going to be basically building out a proper final table that we can use inside of a dashboard design or other like a website design. The goal is that we have a table. Our table responds to the frame that it's inside of, and we also will have exposed properties where we can access either individually as a cell or as in the row itself, or in top of our table. Like for example, this table, we can see our default and we can actually see the cells in each row that we can fill in. That's the goal. Let's get into it. These are our components. We're going to be building out our cells, and then we are going to build our row, and then we are going to have our row types, and then we're going to put our row types into a table, and we're going to be basically layering our table like this. So feel free, pause the video, take a screenshot. That's what we're going to have in the end. Then we'll have our responsive table, and then we can chuck in our designs. Let's build first our cell and get our cell right. I'm just going to duplicate the existing cell that I have. I'm going to go a bit quick with this one. I'm going to define my text that's inside of this. I'm going to actually change this slightly. We'll hug the top of our text. We're going to put our text inside a container. This will be my actual text wrapper. This text wrapper will fill my container and will sit in the middle. I'm going to be removing the padding off of my wrapper because it fills. I'm going to tell the cell, its parent, to push the text wrapper down into the left center alignment. And because it fills, it sits there, which is fantastic. I can do clipping by doing clipping, and if I was to click on my text and I was to add numbers, it will push outside the box. Exactly what I want. That defines basically how our text will actually work inside of our cell. Without doing so, the text could push the cell or overfill the cell in unexpected ways. At least this way, it does what we expect it to do, and this container controls for it. At the moment, our text in the cell just says text, which is great. It's perfectly fine, but we're going to turn it into a variable. If we are turning a text into a variable, we don't want our name of our text component to be the same name as the text that's inside of it. So I'm just going to be calling this my cell text. Now, it being cell text means that it is a variable, and the text, as in the word text in the cell text, is our actual text that it's defined. We're going to be setting up the actual components as well. But before I move into it, there's one last thing that's already on it, and that is my outline. At the moment, there is a nice button here, which gives you custom. That allows you to define the border. You can have it a border around the whole thing. You can have the top, bottom, left, or custom. Custom allows you to set all four, which is great. I much rather do that. And the point of doing that is if I was to grab and build out a grid, as you can see, I get 1 pixel here, 1 pixel there of a border. When I build out and then finish the grid, I will make sure that I will define the other side. So I'll make sure that this side has a line, and I'll also make sure that this side will have a line across the top, which would give me a complete grid with all of my lines. And I'm not getting a double up of pixels. So you'll double up of a pixel if you surround the entire cell with a border, and that will not look good. So I've done that part. I'll grab that cell, push that off to the side, grab the elements, get rid of those. I'm going to take this cell, I'm going to turn it into a component. Now is a component. I'm going to click my text. As I said, I will set that into a variable, and I will call this my cell text. And that is all that it is to it there. I'm going to select this cell text section, and I'm going to give myself the ability to, so I will click this, it will say show text wrapper. I am more than happy to say, yep, it will be true. So it will be showing the text wrapper. I'm going to click my cell. I'm going to add a variable or a variant, and I will turn that into an auto layout by turning my actual component like section into a variant. It will allow me to tell the children with the inside of it to basically respond. I'm going to tell it to fill. So now when I make another one, the next one will also fill, and that'll be exactly what I want. I'm going to turn this top one that's called default into my header. And I'm going to turn this one into my default. And I'm going to then duplicate another one. I'm going to turn this one into my, I will also create another one, and I will call this my slot. And we do have a few variants down here. I'm not going to be going through all of them, but you can basically continue to make as many of these as you like and add them into here, call them a name, and then you can access them. And that's the point of creating this cell component. What I can do is I can actually select the one that's called header, go to the text. What I'm going to do is I'm disconnect that, and I'm going to actually make sure that this will be called my cell header. And I am going to change the actual base of this, turn it to all caps, and define that. I'll leave it there, and I'm happy with that being like it is. I will go to the footer version. I don't want text inside of it, so I'm going to clear that out. I have this thing called text wrapper. I am actually going to leave this as is, but what I will add is a empty component. So we'll create a quick slot component. If you have a slot component from the previous tutorial, you can use that one. Basically, all that it is to it, it is a placeholder for content later down the track. And that's all that it is. You set it up and for it to be replaced. Give those lines, set that to 8, let's give it a color. I'll make it look nice and pretty. And there we go. Drag that out, copy that up. Grab my piece here. I'm going to also paste that inside. I will make it fill the container. So it's filling the slot section here. This slot is defining the actual size. I will tell it to fill the container. And because this is my footer, it just means that I can swap something out for this cell in the footer. And because this is called a slot, and this is also the wrapper, I'm actually just going to copy that because exactly the same thing is what I'm going to paste inside of my actual slot section. And that gives me those elements. And because I have 2 of these components, I can do this as a switch and I can actually switch them out. We don't really have anything to switch them out with, so I'll leave it as is, but in actual Toot 1, we showed you how to basically add in different options inside of there. This one we'll decide on visibility, and this will be showing the, nope, I don't want that. I will show, create, and we are going to be showing the actual slot, and that will be false. So right now we have these wrappers, they hold slots and they can show or not show. I will make sure my footer, I'm going to redefine the outline on my footer. So at the moment, it's very much the exact same in my cell. I'm going to have my header where I have a line underneath, but no lines on either side. I'm going to have my footer where I have no lines either side, but a line at the top. So I'll still use custom, although I can switch it to the other version, but I'd rather maintain the custom actual block. I'm going to get my header. I'm going to take away the line off to the side, leave the line that's at the bottom, and I'm happy with that. And there we go. There's our cells. The last part I guess I'll do with the actual cell at the bottom is I'm going to define the actual darkness of the background of the cell. I'm going to give it a slightly darker, and I'm also going to define the header of the cell. And I'll also make that slightly darker. I'm going to drop down the color of the text to the next one for the default cell, but increase the contrast of the text for the header cell. Reasons why I'm doing this: when you increase contrast, or when you increase the contrast in certain places, it will help the user look at certain things. So we are just defining the visual kind of hierarchy of how our cells operate overall. All right, done. So we have our cells, we have a slot to change things out of our cells. If I was to drag my cell off, I can actually see that my cell has some options. I currently obviously can't see the text one, so I think we'll need to loop back, just quickly add in our text actual variant for headers. So let's go create that one. This not show, we will create the text, and I'm going to create a new property. This will be my header. There we go. And I'll just copy that, paste that down the bottom. There we go. Done. We'll drag that one out. Now we can see, change the text, we can switch it on and off. And we also have the ability to switch it to the default, which also has text there. We can switch it to the footer, which we can show the slot or not. And if we show the slot, we'll be able to change the instance of the slot to something else, which is cool. If we don't show the slot, we don't see that part. We will open up the slot node, and it's also similar like the footer. The difference between the two is that our footer has the top line and it's also slightly darker, where the actual slot one is the white and works just like a regular cell. What I can do, I do already have these badges, so I'm going to actually use that to swap out the element from my cell. So I'll have access to that one. By doing that, I can go to my cell section. I can go down to where that slot instance is. I may as well call it slot. And there's my badges. I'll add that in. And there we go. So now if I was to switch it to my slot, I can turn on slots, I can grab the slot, I can turn it on, add the badge. As you can see, the badge actually fills the entire slot here. It's not really what I want to do, so I'm just going to go to the actual slot wrapper and redefine the way I want it to actually work inside the container. I'm going to turn it on, and I need it to actually respond to the container the way that I want to. Set out an auto layout on that one, set it to be centered, set it to hug, and I will make sure that it has nothing inside of it, centers whatever the content is. Yeah. Now it is hugging, and that's where I can see the change. Of course, it doesn't look like it's doing anything there. All right, there we go. Our cells are done. I'm happy to move forward. I will make sure that I just turn this back to being not visible by selecting the top, selecting cells, saying it's hidden. And what I can do now is I can actually build out my row. So I have that. I will grab another one and another one. I'll just reset those changes and pick my actual types. There's my row. I can actually pick the default type. I'm going to press Shift A, auto layout. This will be my row. Call it that. Done. I'm going to add numbers to these by selecting them all. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go rename, and I'm going to go use the current name. I'm going to go space, and I can actually press the up button. I can remove that 0 from removing that N. Now I have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is fantastic. If I was to like Control D for duplicate, it will make number 5. Also exactly what I want. If I select the whole actual row, then I press enter, it will go into the next layer and it will select all the individual cells in the row, which is exactly what I want. You will notice it's fixed. I don't want it fixed. I want them all to fill. Because they all fill, now this responds, which is exactly what I want. And as I crunch it right in, because we have that actual wrapper, it will make sure the text crunches and cuts off, and that the text will always remain in the center. You'll need to make sure you set up the correct breakpoints to make sure that your text has a minimum and maximum length, and you'll need to set minimum and maximum character limits inside of any sort of design documentation. As we have this and we have our row, we have the ability to duplicate and show those. We can turn it into our component. Being our component, we actually have the ability to add properties. We have 4 elements inside of here where we can add the nested property of each of those elements. And as I tick that up, and I was to duplicate this, you'll see that here has the cell 1, cell 2, cell 3, and cell 4. It has all of the things to do with the individual cells, and that's what we want in each of our rows. So that is fantastic. Now from here, if I was to duplicate another row and I was to duplicate this off, it would say 5. It would actually recognize that it was the 5th one added. So that's how we can create the best type of row that can be reused again and again. And of course, every cell, if you change the single default cell, every one of the default cells will change to what you want it to be. From here, we need to create some actual row types. If we refer back to the design, we'll notice that we have this header section, we have all these inner sections, and we also have this bottom section down the bottom. And if we also remembered when we did our actual first go at the building the table in lesson 1, we went through the top and the center and the bottom. In this one, we are doing the exact same. So I will duplicate this out. I'm going to create another component. It wraps around. This will be my row types. In my row types, I will make sure that I press enter, and I'm going to change that to make sure it fills. When you create a new row, it doesn't automatically tell the actual child below to continue to fill. So just make sure that we set that one to start with. And now we just need to go here and we can add in our variant. But just before we do, we'll push the actual property of the row, the one row up. By doing this, we are setting ourselves up to create different variants and then make sure that they already have this ticked on. If you don't tick it on before, then you'll have to tick it on for every time you do the duplication. So we go to our variant, grab that. I'm going to make this an auto layout so that when I create another one, it will stack it to the next line, stack it to the next line. I'm going to turn my top line into my header line, and I'm going to turn my bottom line into my footer. And then I'm going to leave this one. This one can just be my types. And there we go. I can click on the top here. I can press enter to go down the next step. I can see that they're all default. I can just switch them to headers. Now they're all headers, which is fantastic. And I can go to the footer, press enter, go to the next row. I can turn these into footers, which is also great. I will click the whole piece, click down to the next row. I'm going to make sure it fills the container it's in, but it hugs the cells. And that means that I can, for example, stretch and squash all of the cells in and out, which is exactly what I want. And overall, that is practically it. Besides us obviously building the actual table, this will give us the complete ability to create a responsive table. I will select these, drag those out, have the children components. And what we're going to do is basically structure out our layers to be similar to this so that we can control for two major things. Inside of the table itself, the table, as you can see, stretches and squashes, but as I drag it down, the footer part sticks to the bottom, but there's a gap in between because there's no more actual cells that fill it up. And, well, rows. The header sticks to the top like expected, and that's great. So that's one. That is this one here, which will control the vertical. And the last one controls the horizontal. So when we want to flip this over for, let's say, mobile, the reason why this exists is if I flip it to mobile, I can set this to fixed. It can be a fixed size, and being a fixed size means that we can use the top section to cut into the design. And once it cuts into the design, for example, there, that means that I can fit it into a mobile screen. And then of course you're going to have to set up, like if you're running a prototype, you're going to set it up where you can scroll horizontally from left to right or right to left. And that's basically what they exist for. What we can do is select all of this, Shift A, put them all together, call this a table. Now that we have our table, we notice that we have our spaces. We'll remove our spaces. I am going to call the top section header. By giving it a name, it keeps it separate from the actual rows that are inside of it. I'm going to call the bottom section the footer. I am going to select the center section, which is the row. I'm going to actually call this just row. And I'm going to press Shift A around it to actually create another auto layout. I'm going to remove the padding and spacing. I don't want any of that. And I am going to be calling, this is basically that section that's controlling the height. So this is my rows, there we go. And there we have our rows. Our rows will fill from left to right, and our rows inside of it will also fill from left to right. And now I can expose my row up to the table as well as the header section and the footer section. But I do need to turn it into a component. So I turn it into the component. I can go to properties and go to nested. And now I can push up the header, up the row, and up the footer. I'll go to my row, which is my singular row inside of the table. I'll give it a 1. By doing so, if I duplicate this, copy and paste, or just let's say duplicate and Control D, it will add in a new one, call it 1. And because I've done 1, it will also add in the next actual section for that row. So we got, there's my row 1, and there's the cells for it. There's my row 2, and there's the cells for it below it. And that's how we can build basically a actual dynamic table. We do need to just finish off setting up the top and bottom section to make sure that we can control for this to work better, because at the moment it's hugging the content. What I want it to do is fill. So if I tell it to fill and I drag down from the bottom, you'll notice that it keeps the content here because this row is pushing outwards and filling the container that it's inside of. And it's only 3 pieces in the container here at the top section, and it's just filling the gap that's in between. And that's where I set the rows section and I give it some sort of background defining color. Now I have a table as a background defining color. I can add as many rows as I like. I have the ability to access those rows and change those rows dynamically. I can as well select that table, make it look a little bit more pretty. I'll give it, let's say, the 16 pixels round on the top. I'll go down and add a stroke that covers the container. I'm going to set my stroke to be outside. So strip runs from the outside. And if you like, I also just put on a shadow just for fun. Now that's our responsive table to that part. The very last thing that we need to do here, select all those rows, do another, and this is the one that controls for the actual width. So this will be my overflow width. Just go overflow W. And this at the moment, I'm going to force to actually fill, and I'm going to make sure the content inside are not fixed. They will also fill. If I press enter, I'll just double check that it's definitely filling as well, which is great. So everything is working. And there we go. We have our actual overflow for width, which controls the elements inside on the width. We have the row section, which controls the actual how many rows are shown in the table. We have the header section showing obviously the header and the header labels, and then we have the bottom. And all we need to do, and the reason why we built it this way, was if we ever want to update this table, let's say I want to switch out this section, I want to open up the slot section, I want to go to my slots, I want to select in my slots the actual badge. Now that has my badges. I want to, let's say, change the tables or all my tables. I want my tables to be updated where this is the state, and maybe this is the date, and this is the ref number. I can actually just put something like that, and let's say that is my amount, and add in some random amount there. And this could be, for example, the link. Maybe I don't actually want something in there, but I did want to have it say like view, and we'll change the color. Bam, there we go. Table, view links, the amount, number for text reference. You can chuck in any number if I wanted to. And you basically got your table. From here, you can drag that out. You can update and change any of the little elements inside of this portion of the table itself. And you can throw this table into anything that you need it. Thank you, design thinkers, for watching this video. I hope it has been of help to you. Please let me know in the comments section below. And if you're enjoying my content, I'd love it if you give me a like, subscribe. But until next time, keep designing, keep thinking, and I'll see you all in the next video.